Good morning, and Happy New Year. My name is Joe Lipton. I am a board member and treasurer of Mainline Unitarian Church. Our service today will be led by Senior Minister John Morehouse, Director of Lifespan Development. Dawn Starr is not here. She will be replaced by our ministerial intern, Caroline Bright. Our worship associate behind the Christmas tree is Michael Cohen. And we are having music this morning by the Warren Adams Duo. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Our denomination was formed by the merger of Unitarianism, which held that God is one, and Universalism, which asserted that whatever our ultimate destiny is, we will all share it equally. Today we come together to support our shared and individual quests for meaning and purpose in life, and to bring more compassion, justice, and responsible stewardship to our world. You are welcome here, no matter where you are in your religious journey, no matter the color of your skin or the country of your birth, no matter what your gender identity, expression, or sexual orientation are, you are welcome here. And no matter how much money you have or political affiliation, you are welcome here. If you are visiting us this morning, we welcome you. We hope that after the service, you will join us for coffee and conversation in the fireside room directly across the hall, and stop by our visitors table to receive more information. You'll find regular announcements in your order of service and any last-minute announcements on an easel in the atrium. And now, Reverend John has a word or two.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all, you who are brave and came out for what is considered a winter day here in Philadelphia. I'm from New England. I have no idea what you're talking about. And welcome to our online folks. Glad to have you with us today. Thank you very much. Two quick announcements. I can't keep it to 2 words, Joe, but I'll do my best. I've already exceeded that. The first is that on Wednesday, we're going to be having a lecture lunch, Wednesday at noon, a lecture lunch here at the church. And the speaker will be our own John Smith, who will be, is that right, John? Am I getting okay, good? Nothing like preparing. Who will talk about his journey in South Africa, which was quite a story, and he wrote a book about it. So I think that'll be great to come to that. And also for newcomers, if you're new-ish, you'd like to learn a little bit more about our church and our way of religion, our spiritual practices, I will be holding a new program I'm doing every first Sunday in the McGinnis room after church at 11:30. It's called The Taste of Soul. So there'll be food, but I don't think it's soul food. I think it's just food. So anyway, I hope you can make it for that. It'll be great. If you're not a newcomer, you can come anyway, but it's really geared towards newcomers. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Please kindly silence your devices, whatever they may be that you brought with you. And we'll recite our mission statement together. Together, we transform lives through love, service, and our welcoming faith. Go over to our musicians.
We light this chalice in memory of the courage of those who have struggled for freedom, the persistence of those who have struggled for justice, and the love of those who have built beloved communities to carry on the light of hope. And now, we invite you to rise in body or spirit as we sing hymn number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
Our theme for this month is liberating love. So you'll see that happening throughout all of the services that we have throughout the month of January. So we are going to start with a very important story about how love can be liberating. This book is called The Case for Loving, The Fight for Interracial Marriage by Selena Alco, illustrated by Sean Qualls and Selena Alco. This is just the dedication page, but I really love this illustration. First comes love, then comes marriage. Donald, Peggy, and Sydney had two parents who loved them and who loved each other. In fact, from almost the moment Richard Loving met Mildred Jeter, they wanted to get married and have a family. But for them, it wasn't that simple, and here's why. Richard was white, a fair-skinned boy who got quickly sunburned in July. Mildred was what they called colored in those days, her skin a creamy caramel. In 1958, they lived in the small town of Central Point, Virginia, where people every shade from the color of chamomile tea to summer midnight made their homes. Richard Loving was a tall, quiet man of English and Irish heritage. The person he loved most was Mildred Jeter. Mildred was part African American and part American Indian, and she was thin as a rail. That's how she got the nickname String Bean. When Richard popped the question, String Bean jumped with joy. The two were in love. They felt it should be their right to get married. Sadly, It was not. Hey, Toby. Not in Virginia or 16 other states. In those places, marriage between people of different races was against the law. 100 years earlier, slavery divided America along color lines. Even after slavery ended, some white people weren't used to blacks being free, let alone free to marry whom they choose. If you married someone who had skin color unlike your own, you could go to jail. Mildred and Richard wanted to get married, but they did not want to spend any time in prison. Although they couldn't have a legal marriage in Virginia, they could right next door in Washington, D.C. So they invited a few friends and family to witness their wedding across state lines. At the ceremony, nobody objected when Richard said, "I do," and Mildred said, "I do too." The Lovings were officially pronounced husband and wife. The blushing bride and her groom smiled all the way from D.C. back to their house in Virginia. They couldn't wait to start a family. But soon, something terrible happened. In the middle of the night, they were awoken from their sleep. It was the police. An officer shouted at Richard, "What are you doing with that woman?" Richard proudly pointed to their marriage certificate hanging on the wall. "That's not good here," the policeman boomed. And just like that, Mildred and Richard were taken away and locked up in jail. They were charged with unlawful cohabitation, which means living together against the law. The Lovings didn't think there was anything unlawful about their love at all. If anything, the way they were treated should have been unlawful. It was just awful. After a few nights behind bars, Richard and Mildred were told they had to leave Virginia if they wanted to live together as Mr. and Mrs. Loving. So with heavy hearts, the pair hugged their families, packed their bags, and left their home. They tried to make a life for themselves in D.C. Richard found a job laying bricks, and String Bean gave birth to 3 babies, 3 different shades of milk chocolate brown: Donald, Peggy, and Sydney. But the city didn't suit the Lovings. There were too many cars. There was too much concrete. They missed Central Point with its rolling hills and open spaces. They missed their friends and families. They missed their home. They wanted to return to Virginia for good, so they hired lawyers to help fight for what was right. By now, it was 1966, and the times they were a-changin'. Brand new ideas, like equal rights for people of all colors, were replacing the old, fearful ways of thinking. The lawyers worked around the clock to make the case for interracial marriage as strong as possible. It was time to take the Loving case all the way to the Supreme Court. Notice anything interesting about that illustration of the Supreme Court? On June 12, 1967, when the case of Loving versus Virginia began, Richard and Mildred stayed at home with Donald, Peggy, and Sydney. They were all nervous and afraid they would not win. The state argued that in order to preserve the purity of the white race, blacks and whites must remain separate. Then it was the Lovings lawyers' turn to present their case. They said it was unconstitutional to make marriage a crime because of race. And they read a message from Richard himself. "Tell the court I love my wife, and it is just unfair that I can't live with her in Virginia." It didn't take long for a decision to be made. It was unanimous. The court ruled in favor of the Lovings. Interracial couples could now legally marry in Virginia. Richard and Mildred hugged. They won the right to their love. They were free at last. Over 9 years after their arrest, the Lovings packed their bags one final time. Richard planned to build a big, roomy brick house in Central Point. String Bean was ready to start their life over. the loving family returned to Virginia to live happily and legally ever after. The end. Or is it? Sometimes love is simple. Sometimes love is complicated. And sometimes love has to be fought for in order to set us free. At this time, I would like to invite all of the children to head to their classes. If you are attending OWL orientation today, for kiddos, that's going to be in the Greeley Library, and for parents, you're going to be downstairs in the rec room with me.
Each month, Mainline Unitarian Church selects an offering outreach partner, a local charity with whom we will share half of what we collect during our Sunday offering. The partner recipient of MLUC's January offering outreach is the Upper Marion Area Community Cupboard. Their primary mission is to provide struggling, food-insufficient individuals and families within the bounds of the Upper Marion Area School District with regular distribution of food, personal hygiene items, and baby supplies free of charge. Joining us today is Phil Wagner, who is a member of the organization's fundraising committee and has been personally rolling up his sleeves for the last 3 years as a weekly volunteer. Please welcome Phil to tell us more about the work that their organization is doing.
You are most gracious to invite me here this morning. I appreciate it greatly. The other time I was in this building, if I can just digress for a moment, was for the funeral service of a dear friend and colleague, much younger than I, a gifted designer. And I remember sitting about 2/3 of the way back here, and at a certain point in the service, looking up and seeing the light projecting through these windows, and then just sitting there awash in my tears. So it's a special for me to return in your midst. And again, I'm most appreciative. Your mission statement contains the words "transform lives." What we do at the Upper Marion Area Community Cupboard, as any other such program, is transform lives, maybe save lives, certainly enrich lives. We give out food twice a week, Tuesday morning, Tuesday evening, a great deal of it, to a mounting number of families. The program's 5 years old. I've been with it for the last 3 years. Used to be 50 and 75 and 100 families a week. And then COVID happened, and we're now up to 175 families a week. Mind you, a family might leave our facility with $200 to $300 worth of food, toiletries of all manners, even cat food, for crying out loud. But toothpaste, soap, a great deal of food, a great deal of it contributed by area partners, restaurants, supermarkets. Phil Abundance, of course, makes a weekly delivery in a huge truck. That's our largest donor. With an $800,000 budget, we are taking in 64% of that, translated into dollars, in-kind donations. So that's the easy part, if that's easy. The rest of it is cold cash. And it's costing us $24,000 a month currently to buy what we need that we don't get from the supermarkets, the food outlets, the Chick-fil-A, the Wawa, Red Lobster, Bodo's Bagels, the LeBus outlet bakery, which many of you may use, or may buy a loaf of bread at the Wayne Farmers Market for $8 or $9. We get a huge amount of bread from them because the gentleman who founded that concern years ago has made it his priority over the years to overbake and give to his many communities. So that's what we do. Originally, it was a matter of a family of 1 or 2 or 3, up to 10 or 11, coming in their car, queuing up in the parking lot, coming in and with an order filled out, and then a runner, let's say I was a runner that week, taking their order while they shopped the dry goods in the front of the building and fulfilling the fresh fruit and produce, the toiletries, then stopping by the kitchen to get all the fresh and frozen foodstuffs there. Today, we've converted it to a supermarket model, such as you and I use weekly, to increase the eyes on as to what is available, to increase the dignity of the process. And we're booming. 175 families a week. That's about 750 individuals, plus or minus, being fed. So it's a vital program, it's an essential program. King of Prussia, the King of Prussia industrial base, is generous company to company or organization to organization in their own right. But yes, we need all the help funding this operation that we can get. You so kindly donated some $3,500 back before and right up to COVID. And I stand before you assuring you that whatever you can, in any degree to which you can help us out here and now, will be extremely appreciated by us. And this program operates out of the Presbyterian Church in King of Prussia. If you know the area, it's the steep A-frame building a couple of turns off Henderson Road. And they put a great deal into the community in different programs that transform lives. So that's what I have to tell you, to offer to you for your consideration. I think a program like this and a gathering like this is commendable to the highest degree, and I thank you so much. I'm going to stay on for coffee afterwards and would absolutely entertain any Q&A whatsoever. Thank you.
For those of you watching online, if you'd like to make a donation, follow the instructions that you see on your screens. And if you're in the sanctuary and you forgot your wallet, you may make a cashless donation because there's a QR code on the back of the service and you can use that. The offering will now be greatly received.
We are grateful for the gifts that we bring to the altar of our community and for how these gifts will be shared with our wider community. Let us express our gratitude through the affirmation of gratitude, which is on the screen. Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for all those who share their gifts, for many. And let us be grateful even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others.
Candles of Community is our ritual for personal sharing and support in a trusted and safe environment. I have a number of joys and concerns to read today. After each candle is lit, you may join me in saying we hold you in our hearts for those mentioned. Lori Rogers asks that we light a candle for the life of her cousin Jonathan Rogers, who passed away very unexpectedly on Cape Cod on December 31st at the age of 37, leaving his wife and 4 young children, including toddler twins and a 4-month-old. For Lori and her extended family, we hold you in our hearts. That was a tough one to start with. Bill and Pat Cluley would like to light a candle for the service women and men from the Pennsylvania National Guard that are currently training in Texas before being deployed to the Horn of Africa for most of 2024. These National Guard soldiers will serve in Somalia, Kenya, and Djibouti. Bill and Pat's son, Drew, is with this unit. For all of the loyal service women and men and their loved ones, we hold you in our hearts. Molly Light asks that we light a candle for her husband, Will, who has been in Reading Hospital since Wednesday of this week after breaking 4 ribs and suffering a collapsed lung in a fall on the stairs. For Will and Molly, we hold you in our hearts. Last night, Valerie Saris and Gary Gahagan hosted a small dinner at their home with members of the church auction committee to celebrate and reflect on the success, the wild success of the recent church auction. And I had the opportunity to attend this dinner since my wife, Teddy, is a valuable member of that committee. Valerie and Gary would like to light a candle of joy for the dedicated members of the committee and the wonderful friendships that have evolved. So for the auction committee, we hold you in our hearts. I'd like to light a candle of joy for Dee Owen, who is Kip Burns' sister. Dee has been a church member for 64 years, and she joined when they were 16 years old. So if you can do the math, that makes her 85 years old today. So for Dee, and of course for Kit, we hold you in our hearts joyfully. Deborah Reeder passed away yesterday. For many years, she played the cello here at MLUC. For Deborah and the entire Reeder extended family, we hold you in our hearts. And for all the joys and concerns that are being held unspoken, because perhaps they are too deep for words, we light one additional candle. The reflective reading today is called Finding Our Way Out. And it's a reading that was delivered and written by a Unitarian minister named Karen Johnston. And it starts with a portion of a piece by Terry Tempest Williams called Refuge in a Natural History of Family and Place. I pray to the birds because I believe they will carry the messages of my heart upward. I pray to the birds because they remind me of what I love rather than what I fear. An earnest 6-year-old once informed me that hummingbirds must have nectar every 10 minutes, so I knew the situation was urgent. I'd walked into an empty old house that was not entirely empty. A hummingbird trapped inside was frantically trying to get out the quickest way it knew how. Follow the light, head for the sky. Yet window panes would not yield. The front door already open, I opened another, wide, hoping to increase the chance of escape. The bird, its wings a thrumming blur, moved away from the window. For the briefest moment, I thought it might find its escape. It did not. Instead, it flew further into the house, drawn to a different window. I climbed awkwardly on the back of the couch next to the window. When I reached the high sash, I beheld the hummingbird, a worrisome lack of motion. It was alive, but exhausted. I took the bird in the nest of my 2 human hands. As I cupped my hands around this tiny sentient being, it yielded. There was not much else it could do. Such is the case with surrender. It's the last thing, often the only thing, that's available. And so we give ourselves to it. We fear it is our end. Sometimes with grace or luck, we find it's our liberation. I walked that bird to the outside, stopping at a tall branch-laden bush. I stuck my hands into its depths and opened them wide. And in the time it took my heart to skip a beat, that bird jumped into the nest of the bush and then out into the world beyond. Spirit of life and love, may we all find our way out of the walls that keep us in. May we find our way out into the world that holds our collective liberation, so tender, so dire. May we at birth, throughout life and death, surrender with humility and curiosity. May we be reminded of what we love rather than what we fear.
Thank you, Michael. I invite us to join together in a time of meditation, and I invite you to close your eyes and sit back in your chair. I always like to square my shoulders and put a little courage into my chest. Like the hummingbird, all of us flit from place to place in search of light. Like the hummingbird, all of us will have moments of exhaustion. Like the hummingbird, all of us will hope that there will be help coming our way. Let us, in our moment of silence, feel the light that is drawing us out into the world, and the comfort of knowing that we have one another to cup our hands and hold our spirit. Let us rest with our breath. During the Civil War in feudal Japan in the 15th century, an invading army of one of the local samurai chiefs would quickly sweep into little villages and towns and take control, usually terrorizing the citizens. In one particular village, everyone had fled before the army arrived, everyone except the Zen master. Curious about the old fellow, the general wanted to know why he had not fled. So he went to the temple to see for himself what kind of master this was. The master looked at him with some disdain. And because the samurai general was used to having obedience and submissiveness, he grew very angry. The general burst into anger and said, "You fool," he shouted. "Do you know that standing before you is a man who can run you through with my sword without blinking an eye?" But despite the threat, the old master just looked him up and down, unmoved, and finally said in his quiet voice, "And do you realize, sir, that you are standing before a man who can be run through without blinking an eye?" Liberation comes in many forms. And for many of us, we are still searching for some liberation in our lives. Some of us have been liberated from strife through the sudden change of circumstances, even though when that was happening to us, we didn't think that was going to be liberating at all. I have watched people be liberated from depression with therapy and medication. I myself have dealt with anxiety and general depression through the years. I have watched people become liberated with 12-step programs. I have watched people become liberated when they walk into this church for the very first time. Think back to the time you first walked in here, and maybe that's today. What were you looking for? What was setting you in search of something that could liberate you from what was in your life? I always tell people who are welcoming new folks that if someone shows up for the first time, there's usually something happening in their life that they need this community. So I like to begin, as I always am seeming to do these days, with a question. And the question that I'd like you to discuss with yourselves is, when did you feel liberated? And we'll take a couple of minutes for this and see how it goes. Turn to someone. If you're not comfortable with that, that's okay too. But if you'd like to talk to somebody about when you felt liberated, this is the time. Okay, go. All right, well, thank you for that. Tech guys, can you give me a little more volume on this? Thank you. So, sometimes I hazard to do this, but What did you feel liberated from? Anyone want to just kind of shout it out there? Gender. Anybody else? Yes? Dogma. Say it again. Dogma, yes. Others' judgments. It's good. From feeling guilty. Vietnam. Wow. Yeah. The little Zen story, I think, and your own responses explains why liberation is a complicated idea. Sometimes people feel wounded because they are in a relationship that they need to move on from, and they are waiting for some form of liberation. And people can spend, as I think some of you know, a lifetime waiting for that liberation. And sometimes you don't even know that you needed to be liberated from something until something changes in your life and you realize that you are being imprisoned by it. There are those who are liberated from poverty by winning the lotto. This is a thing. People win the lotto, I'm told. I don't know personally about that, but I always call the lotto cheap hope. But anyway, they get this massive amount of money, and almost to a person, within 5 years, that money is all gone. The money had actually imprisoned them. So throughout the month of January, we are going to talk a lot about liberation and love and how the two come together. Next week, I'm going to speak at length about some Buddhist practice and dogma, doctrine, on love and what it means. The word liberation comes from the Latin root liberatus, which means to be free of that which encumbers you. It's actually not a thing, but an action. We are, of course, in the midst of a new year, and I know that many of you have been worried a lot about what this year could mean. I heard a friend the other day said, I think we're actually in the apocalypse, which I wouldn't necessarily disagree with. And apocalypse, by the way, is a complicated word. A lot of people, especially religious people, take it to mean the end of the world. And it does technically mean the end of what we know, but it may be the beginning of something new. So the apocalypse can be a change. It can be a reversal. And perhaps that's what we're in right now. I have thought a lot about the changing state of religion in America and around the world. What some seem to think is going to be the end of religion as we know it, highly, highly overrated, friends. That's not going to happen. But we will have to do things differently, and that will be a liberation. There is an understanding that we're perhaps in the midst of a great emergence of a new spiritual identity as a country and a world, and that what we're going through right now are the birth pains of that new era. All of us who have experienced liberation, and that is all of us from time to time, have found it to be freeing at first and then sometimes more complicated because there were more things that you were supposed to do with this liberation. Some people have been liberated by a call from God. I'm not one of those people, but I understand this thing happens. It's rumored that the Pope has a phone in the Vatican with a direct line to God. And the chief rabbi of Israel and the Pope were in a meeting in Rome, and the rabbi noticed this unusual phone sitting next to the pontiff, and he asks, "What's the phone for?" And the Pope says, "It's my direct line to God." The rabbi, being a rabbi, is skeptical, and the Pope notices this, so the Holy Father says, "Give it a try. Call up God." And so the rabbi picks up the phone and is connected to God, and has a lengthy discussion with her, him, it. And after hanging up, the rabbi says, "Thank you very much, but really I should pay you for the call." "Oh, no," says the Pope. No, you don't need to do that." No, I insist. I need to pay you for the call." So he looks at the counter and he says, "All right, well, that'll be 10,000 euros. Just so happens the rabbi has a charge card and they swipe it right there and all taken care of. And a couple of months later, the Pope is in Jerusalem for an official visit, and in the chief rabbi's chambers, he sees a phone identical to the one that the Pope had. And the Pope remembers that he had an urgent matter that requires divine intervention, and asks if he can use the rabbi's phone. And the rabbi says, yes, go ahead. Picks up the phone, chats away, hangs up the phone, and the Pope offers to pay for the phone charges. I need to pay. Oh, no, you don't need to do that. No, I do. I need to pay. Rabbi, I need to pay. He looks at the counter and he says, that'll be 3 shekels, about $1.65. The Pope looks so surprised. Why so cheap? The rabbi smiles and he says, local call. I've been waiting for the local call for a long time. Sometimes I think it's the call and it's something else. And I think I've told you my experience when I was first starting out in seminary, those many years ago, and I really wasn't sure what I was doing. The money that we thought we had saved up enough for me to go to graduate school obviously wasn't going to be enough. And we had 4 kids, and it was crazy. And my best friend, my next-door neighbor, who drove a street sweeper for the city and lost his hearing because he drove the street sweeper, and they gave him earplugs, and he walked in front of his street sweeper, and he was killed. And I lost my faith in everything. And I waited to be liberated from that. And it wasn't until much later in my career that I realized that we are in the space of being liberated. That we will go through these times when things are so difficult and that we wish we had an answer, but we don't, because we are waiting for liberation. Liberation often comes, my friends, when we begin to seek truth to that which is imprisoning us. Sometimes that's power. Of course, this is not the same thing as what Donald Trump is doing. That's something else. But I am reminded of what Kierkegaard once wrote when he said, people demand a freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought they rarely use. Speaking truth to power, finding your way out of what is imprisoning you, perhaps even the right of existence as the monk was when he faced the samurai, means that we have to be able to take liberation as something of a life challenge. All of you have been liberated at some time. The bumper sticker that says freedom isn't free has a certain message attached to it. Of course, I always think of the freedom of the soul rather than the freedom of the person in the body politic. It is worth pursuing. One of the ways I was liberated from my own doubt was when I met a woman by the name of Barbara many years ago, trapped in an abusive relationship. She was addicted to Valium and she was living with a new baby. She had this abusive husband and she knew she had to get out, but she didn't know how. And one day, while she was looking out the window, a baby robin hatched in the nest outside the tree, and she broke down in tears. She realized that this was the time now to be liberated. So, there in that bedroom where she had been abused by her husband for so many years, she picked up her phone and she called the hotline. And within hours, she was in a safe place for her and her baby. She filed for divorce, she got a restraining order on her ex, and she began to rebuild her life. But those of you who have gone through this sort of thing know perfectly well that that's not so easy, right? Because sometimes the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. She almost went back to this guy twice. She was on and off and on 12-step programs. She always worried that he might find her. And by the time she came to our church, she had been 6 months sober, still living in the shelter. And I told her that I would do everything I could to keep her safe. I instructed the ushers to watch out for the ex. We knew what he looked like. And as her liberation became more complete, because it is a process, she started serving on the caring committee, giving back what she had once lost. Finding hope is hard, even when you know where to go. But it has to be something that is beyond despair. Jean-Jacques Rousseau said that revolutions are not born of despair. They're born of hope. The philosopher Erich Hofer, who was a self-taught man, who was blind as a child but regained his sight as an adult, wrote that mass movements start by making people feel that a better future is within their grasp. And he said, consider the French Revolution sparked by an idea that we have the infinite capacity for reason and that we are not soaked in sin. The biggest cause of despair in America today among the unemployed actually isn't a lack of money. Most can find a way to survive. It's a lack of hope. Unemployed people are likely to follow someone who gives them more hope, someone who does more for them than just offer them handouts and money. Because when you have hope, my friends, you have that shred of self-efficacy, that way that you can begin to change your life. One of the reasons we have such a high rate of suicide among white men is because they see their lives as no longer having purpose and trapped in a cycle that is not of their making. And if you want to understand Donald Trump, you need to understand this reality. Those who are powerless will be attracted to power as a means towards hope, even a false promise of power. Liberation is not a philosophy, despite what the bookish might want it to be. It's not a mere sensation. Suddenly I'm liberated. Usually you have to go back to it over and over again, as the mystics say. But it is a sense and sensibility towards justice. And as we begin this new year together as a congregation, and in my time with you as your minister, I'm hoping that you will be more and more open to the new ideas that I'm putting into your midst. And it will seem, to many of you, like nobody's in control here. Maybe not. But I can tell you that I would never suggest anything that put this community in any kind of danger. You may grow a little uncomfortable at times with some of the things we're going to try, but don't give up, my friends. Don't give up on us, because we're just really starting. And the hope lies in what we will be able to do together. We have this new program I'm starting on the first Sundays, the Taste for Soul. We're going to be doing some work on spiritual practices throughout the year of 2024. But one thing that I know is important for those of us who are here looking for a way to deepen their life and perhaps liberate themselves from something is a self-understanding, a learning of who you are and what your place in the world, in the scheme of things, is. Which is why I think it's important that one of the mottos that we adopt this year is that we will be a center for learning and liberation. Learning and liberation. Why? Because to learn is to be liberated. It'll take many forms. It'll be some of your ideas. You will say, what about this as an idea? And we will consider that, and maybe if there are enough people interested in, we'll do that. We'll offer classes and ways that we will become more expansive in our understanding of ourselves as Unitarian Universalists, as a people of faith. This is the work of faith development. But let me say, while we have just a few minutes left, why I think Unitarian Universalism and our place here now is an expanding form of liberation before us. We believe that you are not alone. In fact, it is the core of who we are as a faith. We believe that we need to be there for each other. It is the covenant of community that is what we believe in more than anything else. We believe that there is a shoulder to lean on. We believe there are ears to listen and arms to hold. We believe that there is a place for all of us. We are a liberating faith as we pursue justice, faith is the sister of justice, wrote James Luther Adams. We're called by the virtue of being who we are here to a new realm of justice making. And the reason I haven't been moving quickly on the idea of justice is I wanted to root ourselves a little bit more in our spiritual identity before we decide how we'll go about the work of liberating the world. Our faith is expanded when we fight against evil, and this is a controversial thing I'm about to say. Some of you don't believe evil exists. Your minister does. I've seen it. I've seen it, and there's no other word for it. And even if the person committing the evil is not necessarily operating from anything but what they consider to be their best intention, the taking of innocent life, as has been happening around the world, is wrong. It is evil. And we will work as a congregation locally and nationally as a denomination to help bring evil down. And we must remember that even in our own hearts there is a shadow. The line dividing good and evil cuts through the human heart, wrote Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And we are a liberating faith because we believe in the present and the here and now. The name of our denominational magazine is The World, not The Next World. We must not get caught in this vice of what we think is cause and effect. If I do nothing, nothing will happen. If you are coming here today, if you're online and you're watching us, if you're part of this community, you're already doing something. As Hegel said so many years ago, we need to worry a lot less about what we ought to do and more about what we can do. And finally, my friends, we believe that humanity is still in need of liberation. All of you are part of that project. All of you are here, if nothing else, to soothe the tired head of someone you love, to bring into the heart something that is painful, and offer help in whatever way you can. And so in that way, I believe, as James Luther Adams also said, that this entire congregation is full of ministers, all of you. He called that the priesthood of all believers. You who are here, who are already doing the work, you who are here reaching out to those who need something. It's a blessed communion to offer a meal to someone. Church happens when we invite an unhoused family to be here for a week. Church happens when people bring food to potluck. Potluck is a sacred act. Think about that next time you're making the casserole. We are liberated that we consider the mystery of the universe not something to be avoided, but something to be embraced. It is who we are as inquisitive beings. It's what makes us good UUs. One closing story. Mary lost her only son to cancer. He was 11 years old. She came home from the hospital and opened every window in the house and started screaming. Her husband was worried about what the neighbors would say, so the husband called the priest. They were Catholic. The priest called the therapist, who called the house. And the husband said, Mary, stop screaming. The therapist is on the phone. Come talk to the therapist. And she turned on her husband and she said, Therapist? You talk to the therapist, Harry. I'm talking to God. And she resumed her screaming. It took her many more months to find even a normalcy to this new life. And of course, every one of us has lost someone dear, and we know there's a hole there. She felt so imprisoned in the grief. 2 years after her son died, she went with her brother to a Catholic church she'd not been to before, a very big one, very ornate. She couldn't pray, so she wandered around. And she stopped in front of the statue of the Virgin Mary. And she was frozen, and she whispered the words to the statue. She said, How could you do it, Mary? She whispered. How could you surrender your son? How could you find a way to live after he died? And staring up at that immovable, peaceful face with tears rolling down hers, she said, I was a good person. I was a good mother. There was nothing more I could have done. Why? Still crying, she told the Virgin how young he really was, about how he forgot to eat and wash. She said he needed a mother, Mary, and he needs a mother there, too. I don't understand, but I give him into your care. Will you love him, please? And with that, she turned away. Mary was liberated in a sense, prepared now to be run through. She didn't know how or why, but it didn't seem to matter. My question to you, my beloveds, is what are you waiting to be liberated from? I would like to hear your answers if you'd like to share them with me. Not maybe right now or another time, but all of us carry a journey that is still waiting to be had. We accept what life gives us, and we work towards its betterment. And it may not answer all our questions as some faiths do, but at least we're honest. Our liberation is undeniably connected to each other. Our time is now, and the liberation we seek is now. So may it be, and amen. Our closing hymn is number 1029, Love Knocks and Waits for Us to Hear. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. All right, well, we'll work on that another time then. You know, that's part of being liberated, right? Singing songs you don't really hear and understand, but love does knock at your heart and invites you to open the door and let love in whatever way you can so that you can let love out to those who need it most. Go and be in peace, my friends, for now the service truly begins. Please remain seated for the postlude.